I walked into the bank holding my grandfather's old leather passbook, the kind nobody uses anymore. The edges were worn soft, the cover faded to a dull gray brown. I just wanted to ask if it still meant anything. That was it. The moment I gave the account number to the manager, everything changed. His face drained of color, his eyes locked on the screen like he'd seen a ghost. His hand shook as he reached for the internal phone. "Lock the front doors," he said, voice low and urgent. "And call the police." I stood there on the other side of his desk, still clutching the passbook. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried something alive inside it. No one explained anything. No one looked at me like a normal customer anymore. They looked at me like I'd just walked in with a live grenade. My heart hammered, but I didn't run. When I didn't understand what was happening. Not yet. One thing I knew for sure. My grandfather left this for me. He never did anything without a reason. No matter how long it took, no matter how deeply he had to hide it, he wanted this found. By me. The front doors clicked shut behind me with a cold, final sound. The police were on their way, and I was still standing here, fingers tight around the little book that had just terrified an entire bank. I stood at the back of the small chapel, arms folded, watching everything unfold like a carefully scripted boardroom presentation. My grandfather's funeral was efficient, quiet, completely bloodless. Evelyn, my father's widow, the woman who married into the family and somehow ended up running it, had planned every second. The eulogies were timed to the minute. Handshakes were brief and mandatory. When even the flowers looked arranged for a photo shoot rather than a goodbye. No one cried. No one lingered by the casket. No one whispered memories that actually hurt. Lucas showed up 20 minutes late. Tailored charcoal suit, perfect haircut, Rolex catching the light. He gave the coffin a 2-second glance, checked his phone, tapped out a quick message, probably about stocks or some deal, and slipped out before the final hymn even started. I watched them both, Evelyn directing the ushers like they were junior staff, Lucas already mentally back in his office, and me? I was the only one who noticed how hollow it all felt, how perfectly rehearsed the sorrow was, how nobody seemed to miss the man who had just died. That was when it hit me, sharp and cold. Grandfather Arthur had been alone for years, long before the heart attack took him, long before any of us pretended to mourn him. The service ended exactly on schedule. People filed out. Evelyn checked her watch and nodded once, satisfied. Lucas was already gone. I stayed behind a moment longer, staring at the polished wood of the casket. No tears came. Just a quiet certainty growing inside me. This family never loved him the way families are supposed to. And maybe, just maybe, he knew that all along. That's why he left me the passbook, because I was the only one who would actually look. After the funeral ended, I slipped away from the crowd and walked straight to grandfather's study. The door was half open. The room still smelled like old paper, pipe tobacco, and him. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. Bookshelves packed floor to ceiling, the big oak desk, the single lamp still on low. My eyes went right to the shelf I knew best. There it was, Strategic Endgames, the chess book he used to read to me when I was little, pointing out moves like they were secrets only we shared. I pulled it down. The moment my fingers closed around it, I knew something was wrong. It was too heavy. Way too heavy for a paperback. Heart thudding, I opened the cover. The pages had been carefully hollowed out. Nested inside lay another old passbook, the same faded leather as the one I'd taken to the bank. I stared at it, breath caught. This wasn't random. This was hidden, on purpose. Before I could even process it, the door swung wider. Evelyn strode in like she owned the room, which, I guess, she thought she did now. Her eyes locked on the book in my hands. In 2 quick steps, she crossed the floor, snatched the passbook right out of my grip, and hurled it into the metal trash can by the desk. "This is garbage," she snapped, voice like a blade. "Worthless junk. Don't go digging through his things." The speed of it, the anger, the way she didn't even hesitate. I looked past her. Lucas was standing in the doorway now, arms crossed, watching. Their eyes met for half a second, just long enough. That look. I'd seen it before, in boardrooms, in negotiations gone bad. It was the look people share when they're caught off guard, when they're afraid of what might come next. They weren't angry because it was trash. They were angry because it wasn't. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, staring at the trash can where the passbook now lay buried under a few crumpled tissues. Evelyn smoothed her skirt, turned on her heel, and left. Lucas followed without a glance back. The room went quiet again. But inside my head, everything had just gotten louder. Grandfather didn't hide things for no reason. And whatever this was, they were terrified I'd find out. 2 weeks before the funeral, I sat by Grandfather's hospital bed. The room dim except for the soft blue glow of the monitors. He was so thin by then, skin stretched tight over bones. But when he reached for my hand, his grip was surprisingly strong, like he still had one last move left on the board. He pulled me closer, voice barely above a whisper, cracked but steady. "The passbook," he said. "The chess book. Only you." That was all. No explanation. No extra words. Just those 6 words, delivered like the final instruction in a game we'd played together for years. I remember squeezing his hand back, nodding even though I didn't understand yet. I promise," I told him. "I'll take care of it." His eyes held mine for a long moment. Clear, sharp, the same eyes that used to spot my blunders 3 moves ahead on the chessboard. He never misspoke, never wasted breath. Every word had purpose. Then he closed his eyes, exhausted, and I stayed until his breathing evened out and the nurse came to check on him. I left the hospital that night thinking it was just the ramblings of a dying man. Comfort words, maybe, to make me feel needed. I tucked the promise away like an old bookmark. Something sentimental but not urgent. Now, standing in his study with Evelyn's words still ringing in my ears, "This is garbage, worthless junk," and that passbook lying crumpled in the trash, I finally understood. He hadn't been rambling. He'd been giving me coordinates. A map only I would recognize. And because he knew the rest of them wouldn't look. Or worse, they'd look and destroy it. Grandfather Arthur had spent his last days setting up one final endgame, and he'd chosen me as the only player he trusted to finish it. The promise I made wasn't just to hold on to something, it was to see it through, whatever it turned out to be. I glanced back at the trash can once more. Then I walked out of the study, heart beating faster than it had in years. I wasn't going to let that promise die with him. The sky was still bruised purple when I pulled up to the farmhouse alone. No one knew I was coming back. No one expected me to. I let myself in through the side door, the one Grandfather always left unlocked for me. The house smelled like coffee grounds and dying flowers from the funeral bouquets. Quiet, empty, exactly how I needed it. I went straight to the kitchen, dragged the black trash bag Evelyn had tossed everything into, and dumped it across the tile floor. Crumpled napkins, wilted programs, half-eaten finger sandwiches. I didn't care about the mess. I just needed to find it. My hands moved fast, pushing aside garbage until my fingers brushed leather. Cold, familiar. There it was, the passbook, still whole, still waiting. I wiped my hands on my jeans, opened it carefully. The pages were mostly blank, just numbers and dates I didn't understand yet. But when I ran my thumb along the spine, I felt something stiff. A folded slip of paper, tucked so deep it was almost part of the binding. I unfolded it slowly. Grandfather's handwriting. Small, precise, unmistakable. "They don't know about this one. Ask for the full history. Trust no one in the family. I'm only you." My breath caught. 4 short lines, but they hit like a checkmate. He'd written this knowing they'd throw it away, knowing Evelyn would call it trash, knowing Lucas would never look twice. He'd hidden it twice. Once in the chess book, once deeper inside the passbook itself. A backup plan inside a backup plan. I sat there on the cold kitchen floor for a long minute, staring at those words. Then I pulled out my phone. I photographed the note. The passbook cover, every visible page. I even took a shot of the trash bag, just in case. Everything went straight to an encrypted cloud folder, password only I knew. If this was some kind of trap, or a game, or whatever Grandfather had set in motion, I wasn't stepping into it blind. I folded the note back into the spine exactly as it had been, tucked the passbook into my jacket pocket, and then I stood up, brushed the crumbs off my knees, and looked out the window at the first real light breaking over the fields. The family thought this was over. They thought I'd let it go. They were wrong. Grandfather had chosen me for a reason. And right then, at dawn in an empty farmhouse, I finally understood why. I wasn't just keeping a promise anymore, I was making my first move. I was still in the farmhouse kitchen, passbook tucked safely in my jacket, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Evelyn's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Claire, sweetheart," she started, voice honey smooth, the kind she uses when she wants something. "How are you holding up? It's been such a difficult few days." Concerned, warm, perfectly rehearsed. I leaned against the sink, staring out at the empty fields. "I'm fine, Evelyn. Just sorting through some things." A tiny pause, then, "It's not healthy to dwell on the past. Arthur's gone. Whatever little keepsakes he left behind, they're just clutter. You should let it go, for your own peace of mind." Let it go. There it was, the same phrase she'd used when she threw the passbook in the trash. I kept my voice even. "I'll think about it," she sighed, that theatrical little sound she makes when she's pretending to be the caring stepmother. "Good girl. Call me if you need anything, okay?" The call ended. Less than 60 seconds later, the phone buzzed again. Lucas this time. "Hey, sis," he said, casual, almost cheerful, like we were chatting about weekend plans. "Just checking in. Mom said you seemed a little off at the funeral. Everything all right?" Too friendly. Way too friendly. I gripped the edge of the counter. "Yeah, just tired." "Listen," he went on, voice dropping into that big brother tone he pulls out when he wants to sound reasonable. "I know you and Grandpa were close, but digging through his old stuff, it's not going to bring him back. You'll just make yourself miserable. Let it rest, Claire. Move on." Move on. Let it rest. The exact same message. Word for word, almost. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Evelyn's call had ended at 7:42 a.m. Lucas's started at 7:43. No way that was random. They weren't calling to check on me. They were calling to check what I knew, to see if I'd found anything, if I was going to be a problem. I didn't tell either of them about the note in the spine. I didn't mention the photographs I'd already backed up. I just said, "Thanks for the concern. And I appreciate it." Lucas laughed lightly. "Anytime. Talk soon." The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. They thought I was still the quiet granddaughter who wouldn't push back. They thought a couple of soft-voiced warnings would be enough. They were wrong. The farmhouse was silent again, but the air felt different now. Charged, like right before a storm. I pulled the passbook out of my pocket one more time, ran my thumb over Grandfather's hidden note. "Trust no one in the family. Only you." I believed him now, more than ever, and whatever came next, I wasn't going to wait for their next move. I was going to make mine. I walked back into that same bank 2 days later, passbook in hand, stomach knotted tighter than before. This time, I didn't go to the front desk. And I asked for the branch manager directly, the same man whose face had gone ghost white the first time. He looked like he'd been expecting me. We sat in his office again, doors closed, blinds down. I slid the passbook across the desk. "I need the full history. Everything." He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard like he was deciding whether to pull the pin on a grenade. Then he typed. The screen flickered. Numbers appeared. The account wasn't opened in 1962 like the faded date on the cover suggested. That was the disguise. It was opened in 2010. Balance, $2,147,832. And change. I stared at the figure until the commas blurred. Over $2 million. Hidden in plain sight for 15 years. But that wasn't the worst part. He scrolled down to the access logs. There it was. I time-stamped July 2015. An attempt to withdraw funds using a power of attorney document. The document was flagged as forged. Attempt denied. Incident logged. Evidence preserved. The name on the request? Evelyn Whitman. My breath stopped for a second. Evelyn, the same woman who called me sweetheart 2 mornings ago? The same one who threw the passbook in the trash like it was nothing. She tried to take it years before grandfather even died. He hadn't just hidden money. He'd hidden it from her. On purpose. He'd set a trap, one that waited patiently for over a decade, knowing exactly who would come looking. The manager cleared his throat. This account, it's flagged now. High security. Any further activity requires additional verification, and given the prior attempt. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. This wasn't an old family heirloom. This was grandfather's final move, a checkmate he'd prepared long before the board even looked tilted against him. I thanked the manager, stood up, and walked out with the passbook back in my pocket, feeling heavier than ever. Outside, the sun was too bright. The street noise felt distant. Everything had just shifted. They thought they could scare me off with phone calls. They thought I'd let it go. Now I knew the truth. Grandfather hadn't been weak. He'd been waiting. And the money wasn't the prize. The proof was. Evelyn had already lost once. She just didn't know I'd found out yet. But she would. Soon. I sat in my car outside the bank for a long time after that meeting, the passbook still warm from my pocket, the manager's words echoing in my head. Over $2 million. A forged power of attorney attempt by Evelyn in 2015. It wasn't enough anymore to suspect. I needed the full picture. So I started digging. Quietly, methodically, the way grandfather taught me when we played chess late into the night. I requested old records, bank statements, court filings, medical notes, anything public or accessible with the right forms. Piece by piece, the truth came together like moves on a board I hadn't seen until now. After my father died, grandfather's only son, Evelyn stepped in fast. She took over power of attorney. She convinced 2 different doctors that grandfather was showing signs of early dementia. She got a court to declare him mentally incompetent. All on paper, all legal looking. Then she started draining the accounts, not in big, flashy withdrawals that would raise alarms. Small transfers. Yeah, management fees. Care expenses. Year after year, quiet, steady, methodical. Grandfather tried to fight it at first. He wrote letters to lawyers, called family friends, even showed up at the courthouse once, insisting he was still sharp. No one listened. The doctor's reports said otherwise. The judge saw an old man rambling. Evelyn played the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly. He couldn't win in a courtroom. He couldn't win with words anymore, so he stopped trying to fight directly. Instead, he did what he'd always done best. He planned. As an accountant, he knew how to hide numbers. As a chess player, he knew how to wait for the perfect endgame. He opened the new account in 2010, right around the time the incompetence ruling came down. He funneled what he could into it, bit by bit, disguised as routine investments. He kept the old passbook as camouflage, the date stamped 1962 to make it look like ancient history. He documented every suspicious transfer Evelyn made. Screenshots, copies, timestamps. Everything tucked away where she'd never think to look. And when he realized the family would never believe him, he chose the one person who might. Me. He didn't tell me outright because he couldn't risk it. He just planted the seeds. The chess book, the passbook, the whispered promise. He waited for the day I'd connect the dots. The truth, he always said when we played, is patient. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It waits longer than any lie can hold. Grandfather had been waiting for years. Patient, silent, unbreakable. Now it was my turn to move. I started the car, the engine humming low under the quiet street. The passbook wasn't just money anymore, and it was evidence. It was his final strategy. And I was the only one left who could play it out. They thought they'd already won. They hadn't counted on him thinking 10 moves ahead, or on me finally seeing the board. I couldn't stop at Evelyn, not after what the bank records showed. If grandfather had gone to this much trouble to hide money from her, there had to be more pieces on the board. And Lucas, perfect, polished, always the golden son Lucas, was the next one I looked at. I started small, public records, business filings, anything I could pull without tipping anyone off. It didn't take long. There it was, a shell company registered in Delaware 3 years ago. Name so generic it barely registered? Whitman Holdings, LLC. Lucas was listed as the sole director. No employees, no real office, just a P.O. box and a string of transactions. I cross-checked the numbers. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had flowed through it. Transfers from accounts tied to grandfather's estate, routed through consulting fees and investment returns. The money went out clean, invested in real estate, stocks, a startup Lucas bragged about on LinkedIn, laundered, polished, turned into legitimate wealth. He wasn't just a beneficiary waiting for his cut, he was a participant, an active player in the long, slow drain. I sat in my apartment that night, laptop open, screenshots scattered across the screen like evidence pins on a corkboard. Every transfer had a timestamp. Every fee had a matching withdrawal from one of grandfather's old accounts, the ones Evelyn had controlled. Lucas hadn't stumbled into this. He'd helped build it. He'd signed the papers. He'd taken the calls. And he'd smiled at family dinners while the money moved. The golden son. The one everyone said would take care of things. The one who showed up late to the funeral in his tailored suit, checking his portfolio on his phone. His entire polished life, the condo downtown, the vacations, the self-made story he told at networking events, was built on stolen money. Grandfather's money. I leaned back in my chair, the room quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. A wave of something cold washed over me. Not anger, exactly. More like disappointment mixed with clarity. This wasn't just Evelyn manipulating an old man. This was a team effort, mother and son working in sync. One controlled the narrative, the other cleaned the cash. Grandfather had seen it coming. That's why he didn't trust anyone in the family. That's why he chose me. I saved the files to the same encrypted cloud folder. Added timestamps, added notes. Then I closed the laptop. They thought the game was over when he died. They thought the board was cleared. But the truth doesn't disappear when you stop looking at it. It waits. Patient. Exactly like grandfather always said. And now I had proof that the golden sun wasn't gold at all. He was tarnished, and soon everyone would see it. It all ended on a Tuesday morning, quiet and ordinary, except for the handcuffs. I wasn't there for either arrest. I didn't need to be. The calls came in one after the other, like pieces falling exactly where grandfather had placed them years ago. First, my phone buzzed at 8:17 a.m., a detective I'd spoken to twice before. Evelyn Whitman was taken into custody at her residence this morning. Federal fraud, wire fraud. On forgery charges, she didn't resist. I pictured it. Evelyn in her silk robe, hair still perfect, coffee cup in hand like any other weekday. She probably set the mug down carefully on the marble counter before they read her rights. No screaming, no tears, just silence, and the soft click of the cuffs. Then, at 8:22, another call. Different number, same calm voice. Lucas Whitman was arrested at his office downtown. Clients were present. Media tipped off right after. He's in custody now. I could see it too clearly. Lucas in his glass-walled conference room, mid-pitch to some investors, Rolex glinting under the lights. The door opens, badges flash, hands behind his back. The client staring, phones already recording. His perfect smile frozen, then gone. Reputation crumbling in real time. Live on someone's Instagram story. No dramatic courtroom showdown. No big speeches from me or anyone else. No one shouting, "You'll pay for this." Just the slow, inevitable grind of consequences. They'd built their lives on lies. Evelyn with her forged documents and quiet thefts. Lucas with his shell company and cleaned cash. Grandfather had documented it all. I'd handed it over to the right people. The evidence spoke for itself. By noon, the local news had picked it up. Prominent local family matriarch and son arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. No fanfare, no sympathy. Just facts. I sat on the porch of the farmhouse that afternoon, phone on silent, watching the fields turn gold in the light. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt finished. The board was cleared. The game grandfather started over a decade ago was finally over. When they'd thought the truth would stay buried with him, they were wrong. It waited, patient. And when the moment came, it didn't need noise or drama. It just needed to be true. 2 arrests, one morning, and silence afterward, the kind that finally felt like peace. A few weeks after the sentencing, after the courtroom doors closed for the last time and the headlines faded, I got a call from Samuel Reed, grandfather's old lawyer. He asked me to come to his office. There was something Arthur had left specifically for me. Not in the will, not with the estate papers, just for me. When I arrived, Samuel handed me a plain white envelope, my name in grandfather's careful handwriting on the front. No stamp, no address, just sealed with a small piece of tape, like he'd pressed it down himself. I opened it right there in the quiet office, sunlight slanting through the blinds. The letter was short, 3 pages, front and back, in the same precise script he used for chess notations. He started with the why. Claire, I chose you because you always asked questions. Even when everyone else nodded and moved on, you noticed the details that didn't add up. You never accepted the convenient lie, the easy story, the version that made things simpler for everyone else. That's rare. That's what I needed. He wrote about the years after my father died, how the doctor's reports appeared too quickly, how Evelyn's care looked more like control, how Lucas's sudden success never quite matched the effort he claimed. He saw it all. He documented it all. But no one would listen to an old man labeled incompetent. I couldn't win while I was alive, he wrote. They had the courts, the papers, on the doctors. They had time on their side, but time works both ways. I used mine to prepare. I made sure the truth would outlast their lies, and I made sure you would be the one to carry it forward. The last paragraph hit hardest. The money was never the point. It was bait. A way to draw them in, to force the mistakes onto record. What I'm leaving you isn't wealth. It's responsibility. To see clearly. To act when others won't. To protect what matters, even when it's quiet and slow. You've already started. Finish it for both of us. He signed it simply. Arthur, your grandfather. I sat there for a long time after I finished reading, the pages folded in my lap. Samuel didn't speak. He just let the silence be. The inheritance wasn't about the $2 million sitting in that frozen account. It never had been. It was about carrying the weight of truth when no one else would. About being the one who notices, who questions, who doesn't look away. Grandfather hadn't just beaten them. He'd trusted me to become the kind of person who could keep winning. Quietly, patiently, the way truth always does. I thanked Samuel, tucked the letter into my bag, and walked out into the afternoon light. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I felt like I was finally holding what he'd meant for me all along. Not money, responsibility, and maybe, just maybe, that was the real end game. I didn't keep the money for myself, not in the way most people would. After the account was unfrozen, after the taxes and legal fees were settled, what remained felt less like a windfall and more like a final gift from grandfather. A quiet one, near the kind he would have approved of. So I used it to open a small bookstore in the old part of town. Nothing flashy, just tall wooden shelves, soft reading lamps, the smell of paper and coffee drifting through the air. I named it Gross Pages, a little joke only grandfather would have gotten. He used to call the boring accounting ledgers we balanced together gross pages, the ones that hid the real story underneath. In the back corner, away from the front windows, I set up a simple chess table. 2 chairs, a wooden board, pieces carved from walnut and maple, the kind that feel good in your hand. I don't play against strangers much. Mostly I sit there alone sometimes, moving pieces slowly, replaying old games we used to have. It's not about winning anymore. It's about remembering how he thought. Above the table hangs a framed photograph of him, taken years ago in the farmhouse study, mid-laugh, chess book open on his knee. Under the photo, I had his favorite words engraved on a small brass plate. The truth is patient. It can wait longer than any lie. I never replied to the letters from prison. Evelyn sent 2 in the first year, long, carefully worded, full of explanations and regrets that felt rehearsed. Lucas sent 1, short, angry, then nothing. I read them once, then I filed them away in a drawer I don't open anymore. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need closure from them. I'd already found mine. The store isn't busy every day, and that's fine. People come in for books they didn't know they needed. Sometimes they stay to play a game or just sit with a cup of tea. And I watch them and think about how grandfather would have liked this. Quiet, unhurried, full of small truths no one has to shout about. I'm not rich in the way the world measures it, but I have peace. Real peace. The kind that settles in your bones when the lying stops and the waiting ends. The truth won, not with noise or revenge or headlines. It won the way grandfather always said it would, patiently, silently, completely. And every time I turn the sign to open in the morning or reset the chess pieces at night, I feel him nodding from somewhere just out of sight. Game over. Well played.